What's up, everybody? So today I thought I'd go over all the baits and jigs and lures that I use for crappie fishing, and also some tips and tricks that I use when I go crappie fishing. And I picked up a lot of these over the years and also from other fishermen. So to start off, I'll go over like how to use baits for crappie, and I think that's the best way to catch crappie is to use a live minnow. So when you're using a live minnow, you want to pick the best hook. And all these hooks right here, you'll see they have a long shaft and they're really thin. And you want them thin because when you puncture the minnows, the thinner the hook, the less of the puncture wound. So they'll last a lot longer and you'll catch more fish. Second of all, you want the long shaft because crappie have pretty big mouths. And a lot of times you'll miss hooking the fish if it's a really short hook. So these are really good hooks right here. They're pretty long and thin. The next thing is the line. I usually use around 8-pound test line, but anything between 4 and 12-pound test line will work well. And then another thing is just have a little weight usually on your line somewhere to keep the minnow down to where the fish are. A lot of times crappie will hold around like 12 feet deep around structure, more or less depending on the time of the year. So a weight is important to get it down there, just a real small weight. Here's a little pre-set up crappie rig that I got from Walmart a while back. And you can see again they have the really skinny hooks with the long shaft. But here on the back you can kind of see the layout. You can use 3 minnows at once here. So you got 2 lines coming down in your main line. And you can hook up 3 minnows with that, which is nice. But the only problem is it can get tangled in your tackle box and while you're fishing. But they do work. Over here when I'm crappie fishing a lot of times, since they're usually not at the bottom, but they're not right off the surface. You got to get that perfect depth. Slip bobbers are really well for that. These slip bobbers will allow you to fish like a certain depth, like 12 feet deep where the fish might be. So what you do is you put your line through the bobber and have a little bobber stop up on the line. So that way, like as soon as your line hits the water, you can cast it out fine. The bobber will just float up to that bobber stop, and now you're fishing 12 feet deep, and when you reel in, your bobber will just slide down your line to where you have your swivel, which is about a foot up on your line. So that way you can be on the bank somewhere, cast way out real easily, and still be fishing about 12 feet deep with a bobber. So these are really nice, and they're pretty cheap. You can pick them up at about any fishing store. So now I guess we'll go into some of the lures you can use when crappie fishing. So right here I have a bunch of different lures. My go-to lures are jigs, and you can see a whole bunch of different types of jigs right here. This is kind of a split tail. This is what I usually use. Usually chartreuse, which is kind of a greenish color, or I might use a purple. A lot of people I've talked to, they like the electric chicken. It's pretty vibrant in color. It's kind of like a yellow and pink. And then a lot of these jigs, some of them you'll have like a little extra piece of flashy material on them, which is nice. Usually I do notice though, the bigger the jig, you get a little bit bigger crappie. You can see here there's some twisting tail jigs. This one's been a little ripped up over the years. These work well. The feathered ones work well. Jigs, there's a whole bunch of different types. They usually all work. You can experiment with different colors. Again, I like purple and chartreuse. But there's the jigs. And if you can't use minnows, jigs can a lot of times work just as well as minnows, but they take a little more skill. And sometimes of the year it's hard to entice the fish without live bait. But I do catch probably just as many fish on jigs and lures as I do on the actual minnows, because a lot of times I can't get minnows. And now I'll talk about a few other lures right here. So these 2 lures right here, a lot of times I'll use for trolling for crappie. And what I do is I'll have about 150 feet of line out behind my boat, just have the trolling motor go, and I'll drive around structure. And when I start getting hits, I know there's crappie in that area, and then I'll tie up my boat or anchor my boat, and then I'll start fishing with some jigs. So these little lures right here work really well for trolling and trying to locate fish. The next thing I like to talk about is like these little crappie magic things. There's like different types. Again, these you can use as jigs right here. They're kind of like the same thing as this. And here's another thing. These little shad imitators work really well too. These you can pretty much use as a jig. I do like these. My friend uses them a ton, and he catches a lot of crappie on them. But overall, all these are really good lures. You want to keep to something small, probably about 1 inch long. I have the most success again with these jigs, but they all work. Now I'd like to talk about some like extras, and right here I have an Alabama rig for bass that I rigged for crappie, and I was just really curious if this would help me catch more crappie, and I've been using it a lot over the last year, trying to figure out if it works or not. And I got to get it a little untangled here. Let's see if I can get it. Oh, there we go. So, untangle that. Once you get it untangled, it stays untangled when you're casting and jigging it. But as you can see right here, I got it all out. When you're jigging, this really looks like a school of minnows, but I get a fair amount of hits on this, and I've caught crappie on it. The problem is it's so big and bulky, and crappie are fairly small fish when compared to like bass and other fish species, that a lot of times I'll actually see the crappie follow it all the way to the boat and they won't actually bite it. And with any other lure, I almost never see crappie followed all the way to the boat. And the whole way I'm jigging it, stopping it, speeding it up, and they'll keep following it, but they won't actually bite it. I do get hookups, but it hasn't worked that well. I think it's just a little bit too bulky, but it does resemble a school of minnows. It seems like it would work, but it's just, again, a little too bulky in my opinion. Next, I have some garlic oil that I can spray on. This I spray on sometimes. A lot of times I'll soak my jigs in it. I haven't been able to tell if it increases my catch, but I like to think it does. I'm going to experiment a little bit more this year with it. But a lot of times fish will be kind of finicky when they're taking it, and you'll get little taps. But I think if you add some sort of attractant on it, they'll be more likely to just go for it, and you can set the hook. The next thing I'd like to talk about is these crappie nibbles right here. And I haven't tried these yet, but I've heard tons of reports that they work really well. So recently I just picked up some from the store. And this spring I'm definitely going to try them out. I'll probably make a video if they work or not. But it's amazing how many people on the internet and fishing shops and everywhere just say how amazing these crappie nibbles are. So I'm definitely going to try. Alright, so the last thing I want to talk about today is my fish attractor light, and I got this for between 15 and 20 bucks off the internet. And anyway, what it does is it emits a green light, and at night what happens is it attracts plankton, so shad and other small fish species go and eat that plankton, and consequently after about a couple hours a food chain starts up, and then crappie start to come in and they're eating those little fish that this light has attracted. And it does work. I've actually tested it out one morning. After like 4 hours of leaving it out, I threw my cast net, and I probably caught 10 crappie in that cast net. And during the day, I could throw the cast net 100 times and never catch a crappie. Alright, I hope some of these tips were helpful for you today. I'll put a link right here on the fishing light, and I'll put another link for a crappie spawn fishing video I made earlier this year. And thanks for watching, and good luck fishing.